Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Become a Better Business Partner. Run your IT like a business. I'd like to start by introducing our speaker. Jose Alvarez is the Director of the IT Managed Services Practice for Oxis and leads our IT outsourcing and solutions practice. Jose has extensive experience with large multinational companies delivering best practices. His expertise includes IT strategic planning, cost control programs, emerging technologies, IT operations, and infrastructure management. Today, he will provide you with an overview of the structured processes and frameworks to run your IT just like a business. Before we begin, let me remind all attendees, we welcome your participation. Should you have any questions, please feel free to submit them at any time in your webinar panel chat area. We will address all questions at the conclusion of the webinar. And with that, I'll turn it over to our speaker, Jose Alvarez. Jose?
Thank you, Virginia. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on the Oxis Corporate Performance Webinar Series. Today's topic, running your IT like a business. On this presentation, we will cover how to run IT as a business. There are three main drivers for positioning the management of IT as a business. We will start with a discussion about the governance. This topic specifically includes the adoption of an IT business model or framework. We will look into a couple of the most known IT frameworks and their benefits. Then we will review the metrics that allows management to better control the IT organization. We will look into some sample metrics that should be measured on the different areas of IT. And lastly, we will spend some time looking into the driving efficiencies and effectiveness of IT. We will explore the main initiatives in order to achieve high goals for IT. At the end, we have some takeaways, and we will open our questions and answers. So, before we go into the three main topics of this presentation, let's review the history of IT. At least the recent history of IT for the last 70 years. You may question, is IT old enough to run as a business? Are there established or standard processes as they are in other professions such as accounting, which has been there for centuries? And the answer is, in reality, is no. IT has been a new profession for the last few years, and due to its evolving nature, has not been able to fully develop a business structure to be run as efficient as other business units in the organization. But there are great attempts to change this, and in the last 20 years, there are intangible and tangible results that are already recorded by organizations related to changing the way IT is managed. We will actually look into some of the slides, some of these tangible results from some major organizations in the United States. Now, IT has gone through successful waves of disruptive and radical transformation. But let's talk a little bit about the history of IT. Some people may go back centuries thinking information technologies started years and years ago, starting with the pre-mechanical age, which included the creation of the alphabet, writing, and the first numbering systems. But then we evolved into the mechanical age, when mass printing was the main event at the time. Followed to that is the electromechanical age that accounted for great inventions such as the phone, the radio, the telegraph, even the Morse code, among others. But what finally we consider IT is the electronic age, which started in the mid-40s. In 1945 was a great year as the first blueprint for computer architecture was developed, which is the basis for the current computers still. Then we moved to the invention of Ethernet in 1973, and then finally a big explosion of information came in 1989 when the Internet was made available to users free of charge. In the early days of IT, we have the staff and the line executives. IT usually will follow direction from line executives at any time. And IT was considered part of the support function. but this has evolved a lot. IT now has become a key component for the fortunes and the future of the organizations. In at least some enterprises, IT professionals came to be recognized as making strategic contributions to the enterprises they work for. This improvement in the standing of IT has been real, very meaningful, but it hasn't been a little bit uneven. In some enterprises, IT today is regarded as a full strategic partner and player. In just many others, IT team retains the staff status. But how can IT support the strategic direction of a business? I know that all or most of the people on this call have some kind of technical background, but being technical today is not enough. In order for IT to be recognized as a business partner, it needs to think, act, understand, and even speak the same language than the business people speak. This change in direction actually will allow the business to value and support IT investments for the benefit of the organization. Next section, we will discuss the governance of IT, and this is a very important topic because we will look into the adoption of an IT model, and we even sample a couple of the most common IT models out there. So let's jump into our first topic, the adoption of an IT model. IT is really what drives the business today. Why do we need to implement an IT model or framework? That's a big question. I'm going to start with a quick poll from the participants on the call. Does your IT organization currently works under guidelines of a framework? If you can please submit a yes or no answer and click the submit button, we will get the answers in a few minutes. In the meantime, the need for a strong IT governance has been recognized since the beginning of IT itself. There have been a lot of methods and frameworks to support this, and they have existed for decades, although never really attracting any global following or any mass media interest. This situation, however, changed. Let me close the poll really quick. Okay. All right, so we have the results of the poll. As you see, most of the people on this call, 70%, have been involved somehow into a framework within the organization, and there's about a 30% that have not been involved into any framework or working with an organization that has a framework implemented. So on this presentation, we're going to go back. As I said, we're going to review a couple of frameworks, and hopefully you can take some information away for your organization. So the situation for IT actually changed in the late 1990s. The frameworks have been around for over 20 years, but the fact is that business profitability and shareholder loyalty is dependent on the high availability, on the dependability, the security, and the performance of IT services. The fact is that the relative maturity or immaturity of IT management is now highly visible for the company executives. Besides, many companies state that due to the rapid change nature of their business, the downturn into the economy, and the pressure from the competition, they really don't have the time or resources to apply to process improvements. But in fact, this is really the time when processes are critical. Implementing a solid IT model or framework will lead into improving the processes around IT. Then the organization will start improve resource utilization. As roles and functions are clearly defined, resource efficiency will improve. Be a lot more competitive. Adoption of an IT model increase efficiency and reduce the cost in the long term. Decrease rework and eliminate any redundant work. As you implement processes into your organization, they are measured. These assist resources in understand and investigate when things go wrong and avoid them in the future. This is one of the bases for problem management, which is part of the ITIL framework, and defect reduction from Six Sigma which is some of the bases that we use at Oxys to manage our customers. Improve upon project deliverables and time. Projects will be better controlled and executed with high visibility from the business. Business alignment and support will allow the projects to move quicker now. Improve availability, reliability, and security of mission-critical IT systems. Overall, IT operations will improve, as this one is the main reason for having repetitive and structured processes. Justify the cost of service quality. IT be able to prepare ROI cases and justify expenses to provide business continuity and redundancy on the key systems that the business actually needs to operate. Provide services that meet business, customers, and user demands. This is all about business alignment. As IT start thinking and acting as a business, the business will better understand and integrate better with IT to achieve common goals. And lastly, provide the performance indicators that can be demonstrated. Measuring IT is key for success. We will cover this later in the presentation as our second major topic. IT frameworks emerged, as I said before, about 20 years ago, but they have evolved, creating high value for the enterprise. You might question, how do I select the proper framework for the organization? There's really no straight answer for this. Organizations have different needs, so is the purpose of the framework to be adapted. IT frameworks are generally divided into major areas. As you see on the presentation, the first area is the control frameworks. They usually do IT governance and management, and one major representative of this particular category is COVID. They're also used for information security as ISO 27001. But then we have the ones that are focused on processes and workflows. Service delivery being ITIL, the most known around the world. Task like Six Sigma, which is very focused on particular task to reduce or remove defects. And also we have the Microsoft Operating Framework, MOF, which is actually defined as a community-generated process for planning, delivering, operating, and managing IT in general. We at Oxys, we used a combination of frameworks. We use ITIL, we use Six Sigma, and we use somehow MOF, but we also have some audit in place, and we use frameworks to help us with the audit, like the SSAE 16, as we are a service provider. Now, let's discuss more about IT frameworks focused on governance and management, or general controls, which is the first set of frameworks that we saw on the prior slide. The need for a strong IT governance and controls has been recognized since 1990s. Much of the change occurred as a result of a natural maturing of the information technology sector itself, but much, however, was driven by legislation stemming from political situations and decisions. Often, legislation is passed as a result of a public fear or a corporate incident, which also applies to the IT sector. The earliest involvement probably pertains to personal data, a reaction of public concern relating to the use of data or the disclosure of private personal information, as an example. However, legal requirements gradually embraced other areas that were less obvious. One of the biggest development in the U.S. was the a result of a series of scandals, financial scandals, and some of you are familiar with Enron and WorldCom. This was, of course, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. It was not specifically directed at IT, but the implications for IT were big. Now the landscape has changed as the need for controls and clarity become a legal requirement, and frameworks and methods to support this were now in vogue are indefinitely. Some of the most known frameworks that we have on this particular category for governance are COVID, which is a framework used for information IT management risk. We will discuss a little bit more about this on the next slide. And we also have the balance scorecard, which is a framework that is used for measuring a company activity in terms of its visions and strategies. So let's talk about COVID. We're going to go through just a couple of slides on COVID. COVID stands for Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology. The latest version of COVID is the version 5, which provides a comprehensive framework that assists enterprise to achieve their goals and deliver value through effective governance and management of enterprise IT. COVID-5 enables information and related technology to be governed and managed in a holistic manner for the whole enterprise. If you noticed, I'm displaying now the different areas from COVID, and you see the different versions from 1996 to 2012 when they came out with COVID version 5. Now, if you notice the green area of the chart, this is the new service delivery focus of COVID-5, and it has been developed recently. The prior versions of COVID were only focused on IT governance, control, and audits. But now COVID wants to be a full framework that can be used for different sides of the organization. COVID-5 principles are actually 5, and they're called the enablers. They're generic and useful for enterprises of any size, whether the enterprise is commercial, is nonprofit, or even in the public sector. The COVID-5 principles are, starting with meeting the stakeholder needs. We all know that enterprises exist to create value for stakeholders. Now, enterprise may have many stakeholders, and creating value means differently and sometimes conflicting for each one of them. The governance piece is about negotiating and defining or deciding among different stakeholders any value or interest. But at the end, stakeholders need to be transformed into an enterprise practical strategic. We move to the second one, covering the enterprise end-to-end. COVID-5 not just focus on the IT function, but treats information and related technologies as assets that need to be dealt with just like any other asset on anyone in the company. Number 3 is applying a single integrated framework. Good thing about COVID-5 is that it aligns with any latest relevant other standards and frameworks used by enterprises, such as ISO 9000 or ISO 2700 series, etc. This helps the company and allows them to use COVID-5 as the overall governance and management framework integrator. And this is a key advantage of the new version of COVID. Next is number 4, enabling a holistic approach. Driven by the goals cascade, for example, higher level IT related goals define what the different enablers should achieve. And lastly, separating governance from management. It makes a clear distinction between governance and management, as these two disciplines, first, have different type of activities. Second, they require different organizational structures. And lastly, they serve different purposes. I'd like to cover the next short slide about ISO 27001. This is a really critical control framework for many organizations today. This particular standard was born in 2005 and is a specification for the management of information security. It applies to all sectors of industry and commerce, but it's not subject only to the information held on computers. It addresses the security of information in whatever form it is held. Please note that in most cases, this type of framework does not get implemented by itself. It is done in conjunction with any other service delivery frameworks and is usually focused on information security. Also, some companies like Oxys, a service delivery type of organization, use other standards such as SSAE 16, which I mentioned before. This particular one is intended for reporting on controls at a service organization in US. Now, what are the benefits of certification to ISO 27001? You can see on the gray box on the presentation some of the major advantages of having this type of certification. But in general, it demonstrates that you have security competence. That's really what we are looking for. Next, we're going to do a quick review on the most known service delivery type of framework, ITIL. Most of you have probably heard of this or are currently using it in your organization. As I mentioned before also, we are Oxys. We use this as our basis for principles for running our operations. All of our people, all of our resources, our processes and tools are based on ITIL. Now, this particular framework, as I said, is the most widely accepted approach to IT service management in the world. So, IT was basically a set of guidance which was developed by the UK Office of Government Commerce in the mid-80s. And it was to be used by the government ministries. The guidance, it actually provides a set of books that describe an integrated process-based best practice framework for managing the IT services. Between 1999 and 2006, there were about 44 books that comprised ITIL version 1. Then they were updated and condensed into about 10 books, which become version 2. Currently, we have about 5 core books that comprise ITIL version 3, which became available in the mid-2007. This version not only focuses on processes like version 2, but rather on services, such as you look at the picture, you'll see in the middle, you see starting with service strategy on the blue side. Focus on the overall business aims and expectations, ensuring that IT strategy maps to all this. Then we move to service design in red. It begins with a set of new or changed business requirements and ends with a solution designed to meet the documented needs for the business. Then next, we'll talk about service transition, which looks at managing all kinds of change, risk, and quality assurance during the deployment of service designs so that service operations can manage the services and supporting infrastructure in a very controlled manner. Then next, we go to service operations in orange, which is concerned with the business as usual activities of keeping the services going once they transition into the production environment. It's more of a transition phase. And lastly, overseeing everything you see at the outer circle, continual service improvement. It looks for ways to improve the overall processes and service provision. It is important to note that ITIL is not just a series of books. It actually has generated a whole industry around it that includes training. There's organizations that do a lot of training. Here in South Florida, we have companies like ITSM Academy, certifications. There are several certifications that can be taken and achieved for foundations for practitioner on ITIL. Consultant services. Companies like Oxys, we provide consultant services and we implement ITIL frameworks to other companies to help them achieve their goals in IT. Software tools. When you buy a service management tool, some of these tools are ITIL compliant or framework compliant, and they can actually adapt to your processes and to your framework. And trade associations like ITSMF. This is a global organization, nonprofit, and they have different chapters around the world. As a matter of fact, there is an ITSMF chapter in South Florida. On the next three slides, we actually will look into real examples from organizations that have achieved a specific, very tangible and some intangible benefits of implementing a framework like ITIL. Note, these are some of the ones that have been published, some kind of results. There are some organizations that haven't even published any of these results, they haven't been measured. Starting with Nationwide Insurance. They implemented the key ITIL processes over 10 years ago, which led into a 40% reduction of the system outages. The company estimated about 4.3 million ROI over 3 years. The state of Illinois, the implementation of a strong enterprise architecture and IT governance program in conjunction with the ITIL implementation saved them about 130 million annually. And Purdue University, the information technology at Purdue University trained half of their 450 full-time employees on ITIL about 10 years ago. Then they implemented the ITIL-based service desk. From all these efforts, they were able to cut second-level support calls by about 50%, which is huge for them. Next, we see companies like Avaya. The ITIL has helped the telecom provider cut their IT budget by about 30%, but also helping to comply with Sarbanes-Oxley legislation. Procter & Gamble, they started using ITIL and had realized about 6 to 8% cut in operating cost. But they did a second ITIL project, which reduced help desk calls by about 10%. They think that in 4 years, the company actually have reported savings of about 500 million. Multicare, after implementing ITIL, this non-profit health network has seen dramatic improvements on IT services and their overall productivity. For example, ITIL enabled Multicare to reduce its usual backlog of trouble tickets from about 700 to 50 within 6 months. Next, we see companies like Visa. Visa began embedding incident management guidelines, which result in an improved monitoring of network and system outages, and the reduction in the time to resolve those incidents by about 75%. Then Sallie Mae, they adopt ITIL service support processes, which result in a reduction in the length of the help desk calls by about 40%, but also improving the rate of first call resolution to a 2-year high. And lastly on this slide, Capital One, they implemented an ITIL program back in the early 2000s, which resulted in a 30% reduction in system crashes and software distribution errors, and also a 92% reduction in business critical incidents. So what do we take out of all this? These huge organizations have implemented ITIL, and all these examples indicate that by applying best practices, no matter how you do it, what you do, when or why, these organizations have all realized some intangible improvements, but very tangible bottom line benefits. Now we have reviewed the implementation of a proper framework for your organization and the advantages of that. Let's talk a little bit about the next section, which is IT management visibility. It is all about IT controls and metrics. Before we start the discussion in more detail, we should review IT purpose in the organization. So the mission of IT is really to provide an information processing capability that benefits the business, and that's really the bottom line. But to run IT like a business, IT must provide a great service while managing the cost, the priorities of request, which will optimize the value for the organization. In general, metrics are used to drive improvements and help business focus their people and resource on what's really important. Metrics indicate the priorities of the company and provide a window on performance and ambition. But at the end, metrics will help tell the organization where it has been, what is it heading, whether something is going wrong, when the organization reached its target. This not just apply to IT, but to any business unit in general. As we started on the prior slide, key metrics are critical to control each single aspect of IT operations and development. Note that some metrics represent averages and some other just plain graphs, and you will make that selection based on the type of metrics that you're capturing in order to provide the right data to the right people. But lastly, reporting metrics empowers trend development, which are more important than any actual value of the metrics on a determined period. On the next few slides, we would like to provide some sample of important metrics that should be tracked on different areas of IT management. We're going to go through starting with the sample metrics of the infrastructure and application availability and performance. So on this slide, you see the response time, resolution time, mean time to resolve. This is for incidents that are related to infrastructure issues or application. Then we look into infrastructure and application availability. How to measure the percentage of downtime. What is the maximum downtime that we have on an application or on a server or on a network device? Next, infrastructure and application utilization and performance. So it is important not only to track availability, but the performance. This is what the end user is going to experience at the end. So do we have any issues with disk utilization? Do we have memory utilization problems or CPU? What is the average application response time? Some people may want to measure how many users per day I have on my application, because that will trigger some performance issues as well. Next, we look into staffing metrics. One of the first priorities of IT organization is actually to ensure that the business have access to the existing processing capability. So any CIO should have access to the performance and cost information for the operation and support of existing infrastructure and applications. These sample metrics will allow tracking this information. Some of the ones that we see here are: what is the turnover by position? What is the ratio of staff and contractors that we have in the organization? And this is because sometimes it makes sense to have contractors, sometimes it makes sense to make them full-time employees. What is the cost of resource replacement? So some companies take this for granted, but recruiting a person is costly. Not just the recruiting fees, but the onboarding, the training, and getting that person up to speed takes time, and time is money on IT. Staff utilization. What is the capacity for the staff in terms of hours per year? What are the hours per application, hours per support for the infrastructure? It is important to understand where do we stand in terms of staff utilization, so we can take new projects or need additional resources to actually accomplish those projects. Next is business. They want changes to happen quickly and accurately. Tracking business responses is very critical for us, and how to determine if IT is really supporting the business transformation. So we see the infrastructure and application request, SLAs. What are the response time for all these requests? What is the completion time? What is the mean time to complete all these requests? Infrastructure and application changes. It is important to track all the changes that are measured that are done on a particular time frame. What is the success rate of each one of these changes? What is the classification of these changes? We like to know that some changes are done to support the environment, some to just do regular maintenance, some are emergency because it's a down situation and something needs to be fixed, etc. But doing the classification will allow the company to understand where is spending the time mostly in terms of making changes for the business. And lastly, another metric that is important is any project changes. Any scope of project changes, how will that impact the overall project in terms of hours? Next, the metrics on this slide are related to IT financial management. IT as a business has to be run from a financial side as well. So the goal is to manage the cost of delivering IT services to ensure that maximum value and customer satisfaction are delivered from the available resources. IT organizations have fixed budgets and capabilities and very conflicting demands. IT must work with the business units to ensure that resources are deployed to support initiatives that provide the most value for the enterprise. So some of the items that we see here is we need to have an annual budget. That is important for every IT organization. We need to track that budget throughout the year and understand what is the actual cost to date. What is the percentage of the variance of that budget throughout the year? From a project financials, what is the planned value of that project? What is the actual cost to date of that project? And any schedule variance of the particular project, especially if there's a scope project changes. Business alignment. What number of hours or percentage of hours are dedicated from IT to support a business initiative? What is the cost to support those initiatives? Then we have delivering value, the surveys. Every company should conduct surveys to the organization and understand what is the user feedback based on IT support. This will help IT realign to the customer or the business expectations. And lastly, the continuous improvement, anticipated future benefits from technical investments. What is the percentage of cost of value-added services versus operation support? Okay, but some of you may wonder, how do I implement these effective metrics? I mean, it's not that easy. It takes time. And how do I get started? So we need to consider the following points for implementing the metrics. First, we have to define the metrics. We really need to measure the ones that make sense. This is going to be our benchmark moving forward. At Oxys, we are Six Sigma focused, and we use the SMART model. A SMART model means that the metric has to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. The achievable part in this model is very important for us. There's no point setting up targets that cannot be achieved, as people will get defeated, and then even before they begin, they won't accomplish anything. Second, we need to secure the buy-in from management and employees. Management have to lead the culture change from the top. Using a new set of metrics to measure performance is a change that might be attract resistance from different departments in the company. So high-level endorsement and open communications is really needed to get everyone on board. Next is understanding what data is needed and how to collect it. It is not very unusual that companies set up a metric, not just to discover that their processes or tools, or even both, cannot generate the data that they need. It could mean that some investment is required, but we need to be clear about how much the business will benefit from having the metric before spending the money. Metrics need to be reliable and give out the same answer no matter who calculates that. Next is measure and share the results. It might seem very obvious, but there's a large number of companies that go into whole trouble to designing metrics and buying expensive tools, and then do not actually do very much with the results. Usually it's because too many metrics have been set, so keep it manageable. It is better to have a very few meaningful metrics that the organization will use than a couple of dozens that it will never be used. Then do not forget the continual part of the improvement, which is one of the bases from the IDLE model. When you implement metrics, don't forget that the organization will need to revise these metrics from time to time. The process is needed because business evolved and changes will surface as the time goes by. Make sure metrics are still measuring what was intended to be measured from the beginning. After all, if the metrics are out of date, then what is the purpose of retaining them? Just get them replaced and get new metrics. As a final remark for this section, the idea of setting metrics is to improve the business. So set the targets that really challenge the department. It will provide more value than focusing on something that is really achievable or is already being achieved. The last topic on this presentation is about the efficiency of performing IT tasks and how effective those tasks get accomplished. So I know that some of you will share this particular feeling, but it seems like it is virtually impossible for IT to meet all business demands with current budgets, resources, and approaches. We all know that some of you feel that way, and it is not very uncommon. But additionally, we have the business that keeps changing, and IT needs to respond rapidly and innovate in order to stay relevant to the organization. So I would like to conduct a quick poll for the participants on the call. What percentage of IT budget do you think is typically spent on just to keep the lights on? This is only to keep operations on the organization from an IT perspective. Please answer your question and click the submit button, and we'll close the poll in a minute or so. Now, note that keeping the commissions of data centers and applications up and running used to be good enough for the IT organization. But now, any IT leader's primary challenge is actually helping others see what is possible, then driving that vision of transformation through a very multicultural organization, which makes it challenging to even get the change started. All right, Virginia, if we can get the results from the poll. Thank you. So as we see, most of the people have actually selected 80%, and the answer is 80%. That's the true answer. 80% of IT budgets today are used in keeping the lights on. Now, we have some other interesting numbers there. We see backlogs are compounding annually at about a rate of 10–20%, and 2% of the initial cost of an application is spent year after year to provide maintenance on that particular application. We will now look into some specifics on how to drive efficiencies for IT. Efficiencies strategies are an integral part of any business, including IT. Any business can achieve efficiency when the productivity is very high, the costs are low, and the company can still deliver high-quality, cost-effective services or any merchandise. So let's review these drivers of efficiencies. We start with the first is financials. Most institutions do not think that they have enough money to do all the things they want to do. But the real issue is not about if you have the money or not, but how is the money used today. I want to conduct a quick poll again on your question area. So please answer. Let me know what percentage do you think your company is using into Virginia, can you please put the question on the screen for the participants?
Jose?
Yes.
Yeah, we need to ask it verbally.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So from the participants, do you know about what percentage of your company's revenue is spent by IT? You can answer a percentage, or if you don't know, just put don't know, and then we'll review in a couple of minutes. And thank you in advance for your answers. So IT spending actually came up in 1990s when the economy was booming, but the uncoordinated efforts led to a very huge technology infrastructures, these expensive systems and applications that were misaligned, and resources and the inflated IT support staff. Now, the time has to come to focus on what really matters, deciding which investments are truly worth pursuing. So we should eliminate any false starts and other cost distractions. You should consider, when you're looking into the finance for a company, what is the return on investment that includes real benefits? Benefits are also what ultimately drive the budgets. Optimizing. We need to conduct a complete inventory and cost review to eliminate any clutter in the company. You can go after systems that are expensive to maintain and they don't talk to each other. Consolidate equipment, streamline business processes, redeploy staff. All right, Virginia, can you give us some answers on the poll?
Sure, Jose. It really looks like most people are not familiar with the percentage.
Okay. All right. So depending on the type of the company, this varies, and we have companies like energy or construction and material companies that they spend about 1% of their revenue is spent on IT. And when I say 1% is 1% or less. Then we have the companies that spend the most in IT, and these are basically mostly banking, financial services, software publishing, and internet services. These companies spend close to 6% of their total revenue into their IT budget. But in average, we have the regular type of companies, the healthcare providers or insurance or transportation, and most of them spend something between 3 and 4%. So this is an important fact for you companies, as you be able to see if my company has this much of revenue, what should be my IT budget. And the IT budget should include all the operating expenses, all the licensing, all the equipment maintenance supports, all the circuits, the labor, etc. All right. Well, thank you for the answers. Now, on the next box, we see a different question. Is it fast, cheap, or secure? So when it comes to IT development, everybody wants to do things fast and cheap. But things are getting more complex, and when we connect the world, security needs to be a top priority. Dealing with various types of information with various degrees of confidentiality requirements, security and integrity of data is very key. We now see hackers, viruses, any cyber terrorism. That is just a few of the potential threats actively seeking to exploit any system vulnerability. Other threats, such as human error, might be less malicious, but can be just as dangerous. Regardless of the threat, appropriate business continuity plans need to be in place, and they need to be aligned to the nature of the service. The next set of efficiency drivers, let's start talking about the avoiding the silos. So we should promote integration and interoperability. We should implement architectures that are common and adhere to established guidelines. Following common guidelines makes it easier to connect systems and seamless networks, actually. Reducing the cost and improve quality by using a shared service model to address common needs across the departments. Next is IT governance, and this is part of our first topic. Implementing a solid framework such as the COVID or ITIL or even Microsoft identifies a very effective organization structure and clearly defined roles and responsibilities. Then ensuring the alignment between IT priorities and the strategies, and adopting a governance model that is very simple to use and people can actually use it. Next is the measuring part. If it's not worth measuring, then it's not worth doing it. And this is the same documentation or the same type of message that we discussed on the prior section regarding metrics. So we need to evaluate those metrics, set up the metrics, use a benchmarking, and then compare the trends into those metrics. Then we move into human capital. So as most of you have seen, there are budget cuts across IT organizations. there's lack of in-house expertise, their turnover of key IT staff. Those are just a few of the people-related issues that IT leaders are currently facing. How do you deliver tomorrow's solution using the people you already have today? We should evaluate the skills and capabilities and compare to the skills that are required to accomplish the organization's new objectives. And how do you attract new talent to fill up the gaps? Besides financial compensation, there are a few things that need to be considered: career management, recognition, and even work environment. Next, being customer service focused. In this new competitive world, providing a system that meets the minimum requirements is not just enough anymore. IT departments must earn their keep, finding new ways to create value for the commission, treating users as customers, and delivering superior IT experience. And then be prepared for threats, and this is all about business continuity. The more resources that you rely on, the more risk that you're exposed to. But you need the people, you need facilities, you need computer systems, telecommunications, equipment, and business partners in order to serve the customers. So the reliability and the continuity of your operations are critical to them. The need for an effective risk reduction and business continuity management program has never been so evident these days. So we need to develop, plan, and test business continuity execution and post-test action plan to validate the recovery. And lastly, implement any kind of redundancy wherever you can do that. The next three items are some of my favorites, and the first one is automation. Identify any task that can be automated through scripts, tools. Time spent in automation actually will be recovered very quickly in the future for time that the team can use to make investments into the business to support any changes. The standardization. We should provide IT services that are standard, but when you provide services that are not standard, it creates a difficulty and it becomes more expensive for IT. Planning and applying a policy of IT standardization really simplifies infrastructure, rationalize technologies and methods, and gain significant advantages in the cost, service, quality, and the agility of IT. And lastly is the repetitive processes. As you implemented a solid IT framework, implement also a knowledge base that will allow developing processes that can be easily duplicated. This will save you time and ensure consistency on delivery of the services. Okay, so we're reaching to the last slide. Let's prepare for any questions while we wrap up this presentation. Please submit any questions you might have through the question area that we have on the panel, and we will review them right after this particular slide. So to takeaways, the technology side of IT is really our easy part, but we all, as we say, have to start thinking, acting, talking business language to value the IT organization. In the presentation, we have covered three major topics in order to allow us to run IT like a business, starting with the IT governance, which is to implement a framework for IT that provides the solid processes and works for your organization. Provide management visibility. This is all about developing the metrics and reporting that allows to measure IT internally and show IT values to the business. And then the last thing is be efficient as possible. We need to make sure that we spend wiser money, develop the right talent within the teams, measure and report, automate, standardized. Okay, Virginia, if we have any questions, if you can please submit it.
Wonderful. We do have some great questions. Jose, if you open your question area, you should be able to have assigned one of them to you. The question is, what are the dominant metric trends across the IT industry these days? In other words, which ones are the ones that a medium-sized company should start keeping?
For the metrics perspective, you need to track your operations as the basic to manage your IT as a business. manage the operations involves managing metrics that are related to that. We saw a couple on this presentation as samples. Some of them were related to service level agreements. You need to sit down with the business, agree what time would it take for us to recover certain type of systems, what time do we have to complete certain type of request. So anything that is related to mean time to resolve, to response time, to resolution time are key metrics for the organization today to get started. Then we will move to the next phase, which is continuous improvements and quality control, etc., that I will be on a phase 2.
Thank you very much, Jose. And we have another question. This one says, would all of the new processes being implemented to run IT like a business, would that slow down IT to deliver services to the business? Is there a gap?
That is a perception of some people or some companies that if I'm going to implement processes and frameworks, basically I'm going to take more time to deliver services to the business. And in reality, it's not. It does take time to get to implement the processes. It does take time for people to get used to it and deliver those processes. But at the end, you're going to have something that is repetitive, that it can be accomplished within certain time frames. And you need to set up expectations with the business as well. But what we have seen when we implemented these processes and using them on Oxys, we have seen that actually it has saved us time and it has provided us a lot of efficiencies that will allow us to actually accomplish more for the business than less in the past. So there is a lot of appreciation about putting this structure in place into the company.
Great. Thank you, Jose. Speaking of saved time, you gave us a lot of examples of saved money. What about examples of automations that actually save time? That's another question we have from our audience.
Certainly. We Oxys, we manage different type of companies, different type of line businesses, and we're always looking for ways to be more efficient so we can actually do better things for our customers. Some of the things that we do on the monitoring side, we have actually implemented some tools that allow some of the services to recover by themselves when we have some outages on services. We have some tools that allow us to run some scripts to create accounts for users when we have new hires, or some scripts or some tools that allow us to decommission a user when the person is gone that actually take 20 steps into maybe a couple of steps. So those are some of the examples of things that we have invested on that we have seen a translation of saving time for organizations that we can spend into getting some new initiatives in place.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jose, and thank you to our audience and all of our participants. We are near the top of the hour here, so we would like to let everyone know that a replay link will be available, and we will send that to you in a follow-up email. And we also ask you to please participate in our survey, which will pop up automatically. And a copy of the presentation, which has a lot of the information, will also be sent to everyone that's participated shortly. We ask that you will please enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again, Jose, and to everyone who participated. Have a great day.